with these nationwide injunctions. There have been 40 of them so far in his second term already. This ruling seems like it has the potential to maybe break the chains off his agenda a little bit here.
I think that's right. This decision frees the Trump administration from having to run at the beck and call of every single district judge in the country, of which there are almost 1,000. And so what's going to happen now is that the Trump administration will have to stop its executive orders only in the courts where those judges decide against them, but still be able to pursue their policies in the rest of the country. Now, the dissenters in the opinion, let me be clear.
Absolutely. Slaughter is right there in the live chat. So the Supreme Court just adjudicated that the lower courts and 1,000 judges of the district courts, there are roughly 1,000 judges, like you just heard there, roughly 1,000 of these judges. And what has been done by both parties, but done more so by the Democrats, in my opinion, what's been done is every time there's a decision like Donald Trump as the executive, he is, per the Constitution, the authority to carry out the role of the executive, to apply the law to the land, to make decisions like these orders that Trump has signed and many other presidents as well. How has the authority of the executive been supplanted and usurped by the authority of the judiciary? Well, it's been going on for a long time. And the way they do it is they run roughshod over the Constitution, literally, in my opinion, and obviously the opinion of the Supreme Court. They run roughshod over it by going to a district judge that is favorable, and no cucks out there. There aren't any judges alive that don't have or do not operate by the social morality of the country. Some are more anti-white, some are less. So they go to a favorable judge and they say, hey, did the executive do something illegal? And then the anti-white judge says, yes, they did, and usurps the power of the executive. This has been a real lesson to conservatives who always are relying on the law, talking about the law, the letter of the law. What does the word racist mean in a dictionary? All the time. That they have usurped the power of the executive for many, many years by way of these 1,000 judges who have no authority over the president. At no point were they ever actually allowed to do this by way of the Constitution. And yet the law was interpreted in a way so that anti-whites could do this. Well, where does interpretation come from? It comes from individuals. Well, what are the individuals programmed with? What are you programmed with? Same thing that everybody else is programmed with. Anti-whiteism. You have probably a little bit of a better hold on the anti-whiteism in your subconscious, and in others, they probably embrace the anti-whiteism a little bit more. And so they interpret laws don't interpret themselves? How can this be? So we had birthright citizenship, which is also an abomination, a bad decision. I don't know exactly when it took place. I think it was in maybe the 1800s. That the Supreme Court made a bad decision, that the founders never intended, and that the legislators and the population never wanted, to give anyone who gave birth in this country citizenship to the offspring. 14th Amendment, it was meant to give citizenship to the slaves so that they could be citizens and their children could be citizens. Supreme Court made a bad decision. What's this mean? Well, is it likely that the Supreme Court will actually overturn the bad decision of a previous Supreme Court? Slim very slim, so slim that birthright citizenship is almost 100% guaranteed to return. By that method alone, not only that, but it's going to return because it hasn't left. First of all, everybody being born in America today is still given birthright citizenship. For 6 more months, they're given citizenship, even after this decision. And what was the decision that was adjudicated? That decision was that these lower courts could not usurp the executive, could not make a decision for the totality of the country. At most, they could make a decision for their district, at most. And how could they do it? Well, this avenue of doing it is now closed off. But there are no fewer than 3 other avenues already figured out by the anti-whites. And one of them, the Supreme Court itself in this decision, articulated that you can bring class action suits. So get ready for the class action suits. What happens now? Well, even after the 6 months, half the country will not have, until a class action lawsuit or one of the other methods is used, will not have birthright citizenship. Half of the country will still have birthright citizenship. So what does it mean? If one state were to allow birthright citizenship, they've given them citizenship in every state. They just need to go drop them in that state. So that is the outcome of this. This is not a huge victory. People who are merchants on the right are saying big victory, stars and fireworks and neon lights, because they want people to show up for views. Talking heads are showing up, big victory, because they want to have that contrast with the normal complaints. You have to have the ebbs and flows. You can't just have nothing but these sour statements or in complaints, or you're not going to be invited back. So like this Asian guy right here is saying, oh, it's a big victory for the Trump administration. That's what he's doing. There's been no victory here. Sorry, cucks.
This is a very important, significant victory for the Trump administration at the Supreme Court. One, I think that a lot of people did not foresee back in January or February when the president took office and started issuing the executive orders. Now, the downside is we're going to have fragmentation of federal law throughout the country. This is something the Supreme Court does not want, that most federal courts don't want to tolerate. That's, in fact, why we have an appellate system and the Supreme Court, to make sure there's only one rule of federal law. So what's going to have to happen in addition to this, both for the Trump administration and for the parties that are challenging his rules, is that the Supreme Court is going to have to accelerate the review of questions like the birthright citizenship question to get them to the Supreme Court faster, so that we don't have, say, a district court in Massachusetts and a district court in Texas enforcing different interpretations of the birthright citizenship question in their courts.
Now, the bigger issue with this, and we will circle back to that in just a moment, the bigger issue, or an additional issue, I should say, is the white erasure of the Supreme Court. Cucks out there want to talk about because they don't want to talk about the white race. They don't want to talk about our victimization. Gil is over there. Who's the preferred race instead of who is the victimized race? They don't want to talk about our victimization. Why? Because it's immoral. It's immoral to. Why? Because the social morality that trumps Christian morality, that trumps everything, is the anti-white immoral imperative. Why? Because anti-whiteism is a psychological warfare operation. And why does it work? Because white people have a weakness called selfish individualism. And so we don't have a people. We have a vector for the disease to enter our body. And yet we have the gall to blame the viruses and the bacteria of the world for infecting us when we have a gaping open wound on ourselves. So the Supreme Court of the United States has taken on and continues to take on more and more the complexion of the Supreme Court in our once great country of South Africa. And now you have, in our once great country of South Africa, ruling over our people with anti-whiteism and malice aforethought to our injury in South Africa. What do you have here in the States? You have a little peek behind the curtain. I mean, Kagan, Sotomayor, Jackson, Ketanji Jackson, even Barrett. And make no mistake, there's a spat here in this, in these justice findings between Barrett and Jackson. That's not a spat over anti-whiteism. That's a spat between two females. Not uncommon. I tell you what, Barrett will change her tune as soon as the Supreme Court and the clerks and the land and etc. are more white erased, and Ketanji Jackson can get a little bit more physical with Barrett. But until then, Barrett is going to buck up a little bit. She's no friend of the white race. She decided to not adopt white children. Remember that, in favor of non-white children. That was a conscious decision. But they ended up having a spat. So you see this anti-whiteism, this white erasure of the Supreme Court right before your very eyes. You see Sotomayor, who back during the Biden administration, when Biden was writing anti-white orders from the Oval Office, and then judges who were less anti-white, conservative organizations, judge shopping to those judges, were having those judges, district judges, knock down the Biden executive orders. What does Sotomayor say? This is completely unlawful. There's no precedent. It says nowhere in the Constitution they have this power. It's a usurpation of the executive. What happened this time? There's no intellectual integrity. She just, and this is her position as publicly stated, was that it was unconstitutional for judges to do this. Now, when the question comes to anti-whiteism and its outcomes, in both cases, acknowledge that Sotomayor objected to district judges when their decisions undermined anti-whiteism. In this finding, she is for district judges usurping the power of the executive when it arrives at anti-whiteism. There is no objectivity in these people. They are radically anti-white. So Sotomayor, that's really being looked over, by the way, that anti-whiteism is being served by this anti-white, non-white on the bench. Yet again. But it's also being served, of course. Jackson decided she wanted to add an addendum on to the dissenting opinion because she got her feathers all ruffled over this. And what did she write? Folks, this is like the dumbest tabloid authorship that I and people who watch the Supreme Court and read their findings all the time have ever read. At one point, I had to read Supreme Court findings. I had to read judge findings of judges that could be recommended for Supreme Court ship roles. And it's always been very dry, very, in most cases. Sometimes it's gone a little bit off the rails a tiny bit. Nothing like this. Jackson wrote like a total tabloid journalist. She actually wrote after one sentence in her supplemental. It's called ellipses full stop. She wrote full stop. Now, I know that doesn't sound for colloquial speech like, well, what's the big deal with that? Like I read that in articles. That's not what the Supreme Court is. You've never read their conclusions. All of it has to be dry. All of every sentence is citing law, either any aspect, we'll just say any aspect of the law. All of it. Not with Ketanji Jackson. Justice Amy Coney Barrett pointed had pointed words on Friday for her colleague, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, accusing Jackson of taking an extreme position on the role of the judicial branch. Writing in her she actually said, I don't know if it says it here, maybe it does. Jackson actually wrote, and I've really got to convey to you that this is light years away from the way the Supreme Court talks, but it is the future of the way the Supreme Court will talk and operate as it gets increasingly white erased. Unless the white race decides to become a people. Writing in her Supreme Court opinion on nationwide injunctions, Barrett said Jackson's dissent contained rhetoric. She called it rhetoric. It was rhetoric. There was no disciplined citation and elucidation of opinions with proper citation. And she signaled that the liberal justice arguments were not worth much attention. Quote, we will not dwell on Justice Jackson's arguments, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent. Saying that at Supreme Court level is like punching Jackson in the mouth. This is fireworks. This is big. Not to mention no precedent in the Constitution itself. Barrett wrote, quote, we observe only this. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary. I hope they write. Jackson actually said something along the lines of, this is the end of the country. Well, goddamn, this is the end of the country with this ruling. The Supreme Court's decision came as part of an emergency request from the Trump administration asking High Court to put an end to judges issuing universal injunctions. Barrett, who appointed by Trump, wrote that when judge issues injunctions to block policies like those of Trump administration is trying to implement, they cannot apply the injunction to more than the parties involved. Nationwide injunction is determined to be judicial overreach. Jackson wrote that nationwide injunction should be permissible because the courts should not allow the president to violate the Constitution. And there's where Barrett was pointing out. So not allowing the executive to do its job. That is judicial tyranny. Let's see. Barrett said that was not based on that position was not based on any existing legal doctrine. Quote, she offers a vision of the judicial role that would make even the most ardent defender of judicial supremacy blush. Sotomayor, meanwhile, wrote in her own dissenting opinion that the Supreme Court was being complicit by allowing the Trump administration to extract a perceived win out of the High Court over birthright citizenship. All right, maybe it doesn't say her exact words here. Jackson's words. A Trump birthright citizenship order eliminated the 150-year-old right under the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court's decision still allows the possibility that the judges will continue to widely block Trump's birthright citizenship order. So I really want you to think about this. As all of the merchants on the right are celebrating a giant win, know them for what they are. They don't care about you. These cucks and schmucks, they don't care about you. They care about themselves. So let's see if it says here what Ketanji. It says her words do more damage to the Supreme Court's civility. Let's see if there's a quote from her here. It says here, the tenor of Jackson's language shocked not just many court watchers, but her colleagues. It seemed ripped from the signs carried just a couple of weeks earlier in the No Kings protest. The court often deals with issues that deeply divide the nation, yet it tends to calm the waters by engaging in measured, reasoned analysis. So she says, let's see if it has direct quotes from her. The minutiae, I guess this is said by Barrett maybe, the minutiae dismissed, that's in quotes, minutiae, plural of minutia, dismissed by Jackson, happened to be the statutory, that was another thing. That's why I wanted to read it to you. She was dismissing, like, all the legalese. She may have even used the word legalese. She's a Supreme Court justice. So she says the minutiae dismissed by Jackson happen to be the statutory and constitutional authority of the federal courts. It is the minutiae that distinguish the rule of law from mere judicial impulse. We do not dwell on justice. I read that already from Barrett. The danger to democracy is found in judges acting like it. So imagine a Supreme Court justice that's making decisions for the totality of the United States, which is the white race, saying that you're just muddying the waters with all this legalese, with all these citations of statutory law, common law, federal, the Constitution. They'll even cite state constitutions, earlier founding documents. You'll read all of this in there. All of that. That's just the minutiae, and it muddies the waters when we're trying to get to this anti-white conclusion. Childish dissent from Justice Jackson shows us why Coney Barrett nuked her from orbit. I think it has at least one of them here. Here it says right here in Justice Jackson said here, instead of the majority, the power-hungry actors are, ellipses, parentheses, wait for it. That's like a fucking social media post. This is the Supreme Court of the United States. She literally wrote that in her dissent. Instead of the majority, the power-hungry actors are, ellipses, ... parentheses, parenthetically, wait for it, ellipses, again, the district courts. This is white erasure. This isn't DEI. You're stuck with her for her life. We have to recapture our destiny. We have to recapture our destiny because Kagan and Sotomayor will be siding with her. They'll be working together. Amy will capitulate, as she has already capitulated numerous times. Barrett, with the what they're referred as the liberal, the more anti-white side of the bench. She's already capitulated. More of these decisions will come to the court. And you see here this spat between Barrett that they are making so much of. That, wow, Barrett is like riding to the fight against this judicial overreach that is carried out, defended by Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson here, is just females having a spat. Because Barrett feels insulted. You know why, in particular? Maybe you don't remember, but Barrett was a law professor for years and years and years. And she taught what? Procedure. So she was, even though she is not the most, junior on the court, she's close to that, but she's potentially the most educated on this procedure. Like, can people bring a suit against the executive's decision at a district court? She knows all of the ins and outs. She has studied and taught it all for year upon year upon year. So when it came right down to this is her wheelhouse, shut up and listen to Barrett. This is her wheelhouse. Jackson was like, fuck you, Barrett. So it was a personal spat. This is no like great conservative victory for the ages. Barrett has left it open. Barrett and the court has left it open for these people to bring their injunctions against decisions by the executive. It's just got to take different paths now. It can't be so blatantly and easily and quickly a usurpation of the executive. You'll have to do you'll have to have this other process now. You'll have to have this patchwork as part of the process. You'll have to bring an action suits. Folks, action suits are brought up every day in America. The only country where sue is more of a verb than a name. This happens every day. This has not shut down any of this.